GM CEO Fritz Henderson says it's probable his company will enter into bankruptcy, but he would prefer to restructure the automaker out of court. Is he going to be able to dodge that bullet or not? Michael Robinette is an auto analyst with CSM Worldwide. John Bergstrom, CEO Bergstrom Automotive Group, owns 25 dealerships in Wisconsin. And, of course, our own Phil LeBeau is with us. Phil, can I just get the bottom line from you? It does seem a little bit strange. A company that's teetering on the edge of bankruptcy comes and asks for another $5 billion from the government, possibly. Can you just put it in quick English here, what they're asking for and why it's not insane?
Well, remember, when they asked for more money back on February 17th, they said we need $2 billion in March, so we don't completely fall apart, and we need $2.5 billion in April. Look at this as an extension of DIP financing from the federal government, leading either into a bankruptcy filing or into a restructuring outside of court. Because once we saw the money go to General Motors at the end of December, that essentially was DIP financing. There are no banks out there that they can borrow against, so they need financing for the day-to-day operations to continue while they make this, decision here about whether or not they're going to restructure inside or outside of court.
Michael, what do you think? Inside or outside of court? Is this just semantics? What does it really mean?
From Detroit's perspective, Chapter 11 in some way, shape, or form sounds like it's almost inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
We keep talking about the probability. It's going to be difficult to get it outside of court, but nonetheless, they're going to try and bring everybody together with the threat of bankruptcy.
So, John, let's talk about you. You've got you're dealers, and you're one of the biggest top 50 GM dealers in the country. What is your view on the status of GM right now? Is it surviving or not?
Our business right now is picking up because it's spring. We have some new products that are taking hold. The new Chevy Traverse is doing well. Cadillac CTS is performing very well. And we, in general, our status quo are a little bit better. Our used car business continues to be strong. Our fixed operations, service, parts, and body are holding in there. The new car business is still tough. It's off about 40%.
So it sounds like what you're saying, maybe I'm reading too much into it, though, is that if GM were to go the way of Chapter 11, which many Americans sort of assume, you're still able to sell cars. People trust a government guarantee of the warranty, that some of those fears perhaps are not merited or warranted, as the word may be.
It's a matter of how long it takes. If we can go through it rather quickly, if it can be prepackaged and keep the men working in the plants and keep a certain amount of consistency in the status quo where we are now, I don't think that bankruptcy versus non-bankruptcy is a big question. The big question is consumer confidence. People aren't buying a flat-screen TV, they aren't buying a washing machine, and they aren't buying a new car because they're afraid.
Phil LeBeau,
that's the problem.
And Phil, that seems like a fair point, but they did talk about April car sales a little bit on the call today from GM, right?
Yeah, Fritz Henderson, quote, he called them okay. Now, read into that what you will. I mean, let's be honest. The market right now is not terribly great. They haven't fallen off the cliff, as some have feared, once Washington said, listen, you've got another 60 days. And keep this in mind with regards to how consumers respond to General Motors if it goes into bankruptcy or if it doesn't. The question is not whether or not they're in Chapter 11. The question is there an end game that people will be buying into? In other words, do we know for sure that Chevy, Cadillac, GMC, and Buick are going to be here in 6 months or in 2 years or in 6 years? If there is that, if that is conveyed to the public, then you have a chance of sales hanging
Let
out.
me just get this headline out there, Michael, if I can, and I'm sure Phil will jump on it too. As we know, there have been a lot of issues here between the people who own GM, really the bondholders, and GM, and what sort of concessions would be required. There's a headline crossing that the GM Bondholder Committee is willing to make deep concessions if GM produces a viable plan. Deep concessions. Is that new? Is that significant in any way? Michael and Phil. Michael, you first.
Well, certainly the bondholder is going to have to come to the table, and I think they know everybody's going to have to take a pretty severe haircut. I think the bigger issue right now is labor. And how quickly they're going to come to the table with the type of concessions that they're going to be required to make. And then something that was mentioned earlier I think is absolutely pertinent. We got to get in and out of this very quickly. This cannot last for several months and moving into a year. The consumers are not willing to wait that long.
What do you say, Phil? Deep
Aaron,
concessions.
obviously they're going to have to take deep concessions. I mean, this statement from the bondholders is kind of one of those, well, of course you're going to have to do that.
Right.
The federal government's already came out and said it's not enough to cut the debt from $29 billion unsecured down to $9 billion. You have to go further. So what's deep? Is it $9 billion? Is it $5 billion? Clearly they're going to have to go deeper.
And John, one of the areas we keep hearing about there being the most overcapacity in the U.S. auto system is the dealerships. Is that something? I mean, can we fix that here? How much pain is really involved?
There's a tremendous amount of pain to downsize the dealership network, and it's very complicated because there are 50 states with 50 sets of laws that all apply. The most important issue we have right now is we got to get confidence back, and then we can run this dealership network, and it will resize itself at the new level. If we're going to be at 10 or 11 million units, I believe it'll get there on its own. The whole business of the General Motors focus is not totally accurate. General Motors is still the largest manufacturer and seller of cars and trucks in the U.S., much bigger than anyone else. And because of that, it's been the focal point. But this applies also to Toyota and Honda and Mercedes-Benz. Everybody's got the same issue. We've come from a 16 million unit sales year to a 9.5 million sales year, and nobody can resize fast enough for that.
Michael, John, Phil, thank you.
Thank you.